Hey. Okay. We're in business, right, John?
We're in business.
John, you didn't tell me how much time I have. I assumed I had till 3 o'clock this afternoon. Is that correct? When do y'all have to get to class? When do y'all have to get off? Y'all have to get away to class? Yeah, I mean, because I can talk all afternoon, you know. Okay. What birds tell us about our world? Some of this is going to be a reminder to you about what birds tell us about our world. And some of the things that birds are telling us you might not have noticed. But I, being an avid bird watcher and naturalist and study these sort of things, have noticed several things. So let me share what I have noticed about what birds tell us about our world. Obviously, birds tell us about the changing seasons. We all know that, right? Birds tell us that autumn's coming, fall's coming. And we know that because birds that breed up in the northern part of the United States, get my little pointer working here, some of them migrate down here and spend the winter with us. And some of them cross the Gulf of Mexico or go through Mexico down to South America, Central and South America, to spend the winter. So when we see these birds coming in from the northern part of North America, northern United States, Canada, then we know fall is coming. And some of these birds start showing up really early, by the way. You all know hummingbirds, right? Know what a hummingbird looks like. This ruby-throated hummingbird. Most of them breed pretty far north of here, up in the northeastern United States. All of them breed east of the Rockies, all the way up into Nova Scotia. They start coming through in late July. So the hummingbird tells us that autumn's coming as early. I mean, they're late July migrants. So they come in August, they start booming as they come through. 99% of the entire population of this bird, ruby-throated hummingbird, 99%, and there, by the way, there are 10 million of these birds, come through this area every single year. And they go down to Central America, all the way down to Panama, and in the spring they come back through. But they start telling us autumn's in the air as early as late July and certainly August, when we're sweltering in heat. These birds are saying, hey, autumn's coming, don't worry, autumn's coming. And this bird, a shorebird. Now, you may not notice shorebirds, but they're around your area. A lot of these photographs I'm showing you because you live in an area where you'll see all of these birds. This little bird occupies the little shores of creeks and rivers and certainly beaches. It's called a least sandpiper. Get this. It breeds in the high Arctic, top of the world. And nearly all of them migrate through our area on the way to southern South America as far south as Tierra del Fuego. And they do this every year. And they start coming through in August. In September, they boom. And they're, okay, I see this bird. I see it in your area. I see it along the riverbanks of the San Jacinto River. I see it along the creeks, Cypress Creek, Spring Creek. Autumn's in the air. And then we have these hawks, magnificent hawks that migrate in huge numbers in swirls across the sky. We call those swirls kettles, by the way. And they come through in unbelievable numbers. These are Swainson's hawks. And by the way, Kathy and I live in the Woodlands. And one day in Market Square in the Woodlands, if you're familiar with that, fine. If not, don't worry about it. Market Square in the Woodlands, I sort of noticed something up in the sky. I looked up, and that's what I saw. A huge kettle of hawks coming through. And this was in September. Autumn's in the air. Nobody else around me. Everybody else around me thought I was loony. You know, here's an old man, he's loony. But I was just enamored with these Swainson's hawks coming through our area. Bald eagles. You have bald eagles that come down here in the winter. They come from the Mississippi River Valley, and they come down here in the winter to breed. It's a reverse breeding pattern. Instead of breeding in the summer, like songbirds do and most hawks do, they breed in the winter. And they come down here every single year to breed. We have them in the woodlands. You have them along the San Jacinto River near you. We almost lost this bird, but that's a whole nother story. I won't get into that right now. But they come down here, and they are certainly a signal that falls in the air. Isn't that a beautiful bird? Our national symbol. And we see it. I saw this flying over a road the other day where we live in the woodlands. And the geese, you all know about geese. Geese are always harbingers of fall, harbingers of autumn. And Kathy and I saw flocks like this just this past weekend at a refuge along the coast. And then ducks tell us winter's here. Ducks come down for the winter. The huge population of ducks that breed in the grasslands and the prairie, what are called prairie potholes, little kind of inland lakes, all the way up through the central plains of the United States and Canada, and they come down here in the winter, and they tell us, winter's here, winter's here. Ask a hunter. Hunters will tell you, hey, look for these birds, because they know winter's here and it's hunting season. And of course, geese again. And this bird that used to be common in this area, in this very area, years and years ago, decades ago, and we almost lost it due to DDT poisoning, which the same happened with bald eagles, as you probably know. But we don't have any nesting colonies of these birds anymore. They do still come down here, though, for the winter. The populations that are doing well, they're doing well north of here in the northeastern United States. And when you see this bird around here, you know winter's here, because they only occur it's called an osprey. It only comes here in the winter. And cranes, I have a column coming out about cranes, sandhill cranes. These beautiful birds that make this chortling sound as they sail through the air in huge flocks. Winter's here, winter's here. They're coming down here to spend the winter with us. And I'll get back to this little bird. It's a little songbird. It shows up in people's yards. We had it in our yard just about a week ago. A bunch of them in our yard, by the way. They'll start showing up all around. They'll start showing up on this campus, by the way. I guarantee you that if I probably went out there right now, I'd find them for you. And, it doesn't look like anything, does it? I'll come back to it in a minute. And then you have these sparrows. Sparrows are also grassland breeding birds. They breed in the Great Plains, and they come down here to spend their. All these birds are telling us winter's here. So we've got fall, winter, and birds are signals of these changing seasons. And then comes spring. And one of the first harbingers of spring, of course, is a robin. Always heard. A robin tells you spring's in the air. Well, for us, the robin starts singing its typical song, cheerily, 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 chirrup, 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 at dawn, beginning in February. Not beginning in March or April, beginning in early February. Sometimes as early as late January. And it wakes me up, that's okay. I'm usually awake at that time, saying, cheerily, cheerily, cheer up, cheer up. Thank you, Robin. I know spring's coming, spring's coming. And then birds start migrating back through. Remember, I told you about them coming down? And then they start going back through. And they make these huge migrations, crossing the Gulf of Mexico. Think about that, crossing the Gulf of Mexico, 600-mile trip from the Yucatan Peninsula across the Gulf of Mexico to our area. And when they start showing up, spring's here, spring's here. One of the first of these is, of course, a bird you well know, the purple martin. They're one of the first to arrive. They start arriving in February too, and certainly by March. Now, look at the migration of these beautiful purple martins. There are the purple martins. They come all the way from the pampas of Brazil. We were there. Kathy and I were down here last summer. Those birds migrate all the way. Now, it took us how long? In an airplane, an overnight airplane trip, 8 hours? 8 hours to make that trip. And these birds make this migration every year, back and forth, back and forth. And they tell us spring's in the air. Now, I told you about this bird, right? It told us that winter was here, remember? And they also tell us spring is here because they change to that color. These are called American goldfinches. And every time this bird changes its pattern, when it's this pattern, I get email from readers of my column. I have a strange bird in my yard. I've never seen anything like this. Can you help me identify it? And I always know what they're looking at. They'll usually send me a picture, and I always know what it is. And they never believe me when I tell them it's American goldfinch until spring comes. It molts into these beautiful, bright golden yellow feathers. And it says, spring's here, spring's here. They're going to migrate all the way up into the maritime provinces of Canada. Imagine that, but they spend the winter with us, and they tell us spring's here. Now, these little birds are called dowagers. These little birds, and they feed in marshes, inland marshes and salt marshes. And they also winter all the way down at the bottom of the world, Tierra del Fuego. And they breed at the top of the world in the high Arctic. And they come right through your area. And they tell you spring is here. Spring is here. This is a these are called dowitchers. This is called a prothonotary warbler. It winters in Central America and in parts of North and South America, and then it comes up here to breed, and it breeds right here in your area. Anywhere there's a kind of swampy, marshy area, and I know you have a nature trail that goes down to the creek. I know because I was part of making that happen. You can go down that nature trail in the spring and you're going to find this bird. It breeds here. It tells you spring is here. Spring's in the air. And we know spring's in the air also because we get a gazillion bird watchers that come to this area to see these birds. Because, back up just a little bit, about 90% of the songbirds that winter in Central and South America, they all migrate through our area. Imagine an area basically between Galveston and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and think of that as a funnel. And about 90% of the songbirds that winter in Latin America migrate through here every single spring. And some of them breed here, like that guy, called a prothonotary warbler. Beautiful little bird. It's here, folks. Go see it this spring. And that brings the bird watchers from all over the world because we get so many of these, such a huge variety of these birds. They come here in the spring. Now, so birds tell us they're good for the economy. They're really good for the economy. Look at this. There are 47 million bird watchers. That's more than gardeners and golfers. Now, this is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey. For sure, a lot of golfers, a lot of gardeners are also bird watchers, so there's a lot of overlap here. But look at that, 47 million people. And what do? They're out looking at birds. They're enjoying the activity of bird watching. So what do? Well, I'll tell you right away. They spend money, lots of money, $41 billion a year that these people spend on bird watching. Buying equipment, of course, buying bird feeders, all the things that go along with it. They're a huge boost to our economy. So this hooded warbler that breeds in your area also comes up from Central America to breed here. This bird brings in a lot of money because people are coming to see it. It breeds in the Sam Houston National Forest. It breeds just north of here in the Sam Houston National Forest and up in Angelina National Forest. They come here to see it because this is one of the few places they can easily find it. And the beautiful Baltimore oriole, unfortunately, doesn't breed here. It goes farther east, but it's one of the easiest places to find it and see it as it migrates through here and it stops in people's backyards to feed on anything that's there. You want to see a Baltimore oriole, then come spring, come about late March, early April, tack a half an orange up to a tree, and you'll get this bird because it loves the pulp of oranges and the fruit of oranges. Beautiful bird, gorgeous bird, comes through here, huge numbers. Go along the coast and you'll see this gorgeous pink bird that everybody thinks is a flamingo. No, we don't have flamingos in North America. This is called a roseate. Think of the word, roseate spoonbill. And it has the most beautiful colors or probably some of the most beautiful colors of any bird in the world. They tell us, hey, spring's here. And summer comes and we get these gorgeous birds. And I sometimes call this the rainbow bird because it is so absolutely gorgeous. And it comes down here in the summer to breed with us. And then we have bluebirds. In our yard, we have 2 bluebird boxes. And we get nesting bluebirds every summer. Isn't that great? Nesting bluebirds. They tell us summer's here. And they generally breed, or they generally, they generally have 4 broods, 3 to 4 broods every summer. And we spend a fortune feeding them little mealworms, sort of called mealworms, so that they can feed their babies and keep their babies alive. And you have mockingbirds everywhere, don't you? And mockingbirds during spring and summer, especially during summer, sing their hearts out, sometimes with the irritation of people. A mockingbird can compose, underscore the word compose, 250 different songs on the wing while it's flying or while it's perched. It has an incredible repertoire of songs. We sometimes take the mockingbird, our state bird, for granted. Next time, think about that bird's brain composing all those songs. And the cardinal, the beautiful northern cardinal, bright red in the late spring and summer, and certainly a color of summer, bright red. And I love this bird called a Carolina wren. Carolina wren has a wonderful song that I particularly love because, I'm a teacher. And this bird has a song that goes, teacher, 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 teacher. I love that song. And it tells me summer's here, spring's here. And a little titmouse, titmouse occurs in people's backyards all the time. It's on your campus all the time, foraging around the trees, looking for insects and nuts. A little bitty bird with a little gray bird with a crest like a cardinal. And lots of people love watching these birds. They enjoy it. They spend money watching these birds. The poet Mary Oliver said, whoever you are, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Birds tell us what kind of place we live in. Now, this is where we live. This is a sky view, a satellite view of the whole area, whole greater Houston area. And that's what people normally think of when they think of Houston. Great big metropolis, sprawling out to Kingwood and the woodlands and everywhere. And they think of the ship channel, massive ship channel, huge industry. Houston represents the oil industry, right? That's what sometimes people think. And they look at this. Okay, this is Houston. Big city, thriving city, lots of industry, lots of oil stuff. But birds remind us that this is a forest. The place we live in is also a forest. And that's why we have pileated woodpeckers. This is a foot-long woodpecker, largest woodpecker in North America. And it hammers away at trees on your campus every spring and summer to remind you that regardless of how many buildings you put up, this is still a woodland. Otherwise, it wouldn't be here. It wouldn't be here. And you have owls, too. This is a barred owl. It loves river floodplains. And you actually live in a river floodplain. God help us if the river ever floods this far, but you actually live in a river floodplain. And we know it because if you go along any of the parks along the San Jacinto River or Spring Creek, Cypress Creek, you can hear this bird calling in the daytime. It has the sound of a barking dog, ho, 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 ho. And it tells you that you live in a swampy woodland area. Otherwise, it wouldn't be here. So this bird tells you what kind of land you have. This is a mourning dove. Mourning doves tell you that you have pastures, that you have fields, you have open areas, or else it wouldn't be here. Grasslands tell you you have sparrows, tell you have grasslands. We know that. If we didn't have grasslands, we wouldn't have this bird. This is a sparrow, a savanna sparrow. And it tells you, you also have grasslands here. Otherwise, I wouldn't come here. This is the kind of land you have, people. And you have the meadowlark, beautiful meadowlark. Sings a gorgeous song in the spring called Spring of the Year. Beautiful song. Tells you have prairies and grasslands. We have a lot of wading birds, like this great blue heron that wades in water and swamp. This bird tells you live in a water plain area. You have lots of water, a lot of creeks, a lot of bayous, a lot of places like this, else I wouldn't be here. And the great egret, same thing. Look at their legs. These guys are made to wade in water and marshes, and they're here and they're all over the place. So what does that tell you about the land you live in? You live in a water plain area. And they fly. They're beautiful birds, sending you a message, telling you about the world in which you live all the time. Or the snowy egret, the beautiful snowy egret, which we almost lost because of those beautiful plumes that market hunters hunted this bird in the late 1800s and early 1900s and almost killed them off to get those beautiful plumes on its head to decorate women's hats. Fortunately, we conserve this bird, and it's everywhere right now. The brown pelican along the coast tells you live near a sea. If you didn't see a brown pelican, you wouldn't, it's only here because you live near an ocean. Pretty big ocean, too. It's called the Gulf of Mexico. And this bird tells you, hey, you guys, you might think you live away from the sea, but you don't. You live very close to the Gulf of Mexico. And, of course, everybody's been to Galveston and seen the gulls, right? Technically, these are called laughing gulls. And if you've been to Galveston, you've seen these birds. They tell you, you live along the coast. You live near a sea. Whatever you think you're living, you live near a sea. This is your land. The Forester's Tern. which feeds along the coast, but also patrols Cypress Creek and Spring Creek and the San Jacinto River and all of the little tiny lakes around here. You're near a coast, and you're also near a river that flows into the sea. The San Jacinto River eventually empties into the ocean. This bird tells you that. Now, some birds are telling us they're expanding their range, and in remarkable ways. This is called a crested caracara. Its folk name is Mexican eagle. It used to be that this bird only occurred in the far south of Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. You didn't see it much farther than that. 30 years ago, if you saw this bird, say, past, I don't know, Corpus Christi, I'd say, okay, go get your eyes examined. This bird didn't go up that far. It's now common here, common. And it's moving all the way up into Dallas, Oklahoma, Arkansas. It's expanding its range. Now, birds don't just expand their range for the heck of it. There's some reason they're expanding their range. And we'll talk about that in a minute. White-winged doves, another bird that only occurred in South Texas. This bird, it's it's all over the place here. And that's pretty recent. All these birds started expanding their range about 20 years ago, and they did it fast. Really, really, really fast. Because yes, throughout history, birds have changed their habitat, changed their range. Yes, but it's taken them a long time. I mean, over a century or over a couple of centuries. These birds have been expanding their range since 1990. Really fast in the bird world. This gorgeous little black-bellied whistling duck. Again, a South Texas bird, arguably a northern Mexico bird that began expanding its range into Texas at the turn of the 19th century, and now is common all the way up here in the past 20 years. What are they telling us? What are they saying? Now, some birds are telling us they're doing really well. Things are going great. Mockingbird can adapt to anything. Mockingbird lives everywhere. One of the most adaptable birds in the world. Grackles, these are these big black birds with a long tail. They're very adaptable. They live anywhere. Ravens, by the way, are doing very well. Not here. We don't have ravens here, but out in West Texas, we have lots of ravens. They're doing very well. Crows are doing extremely well. They're doing great. But too many birds are sounding an alarm. You may have heard the story of the canary in the coal mine. And what that's about is, in olden days, before we had electronics, before we had cell phones or whatever, sensors, coal miners went down to the coal mine, and the danger they faced was not so much the collapse of the mine, but the buildup of methane gas as they were mining for coal in that coal mine. And if the methane gas built up too high a level, it'd kill them. Now, methane gas is not something that you as humans can smell or taste or feel, so it can sneak up on you and wipe you out in an instant. So they put canaries in a cage and took them down to the coal mine. Now, birds are hypersensitive to minute changes in the environment. Little bitty changes in the environment. Birds sense it long before we do. They react to it long before we do. So when the canary keeled over in the cage, the miners knew to get out of there. The birds were telling us, your environment is lethal. Get out of here. We gave our lives to tell you that. Now, we got birds that are giving their lives right now. They're in peril. There are about a little under 10,000 species of birds worldwide. Of all the worldwide species of birds, over 10% of them are either going extinct really fast or facing extinction right now, at this very moment. 12%. By the turn of this century, 2100, we expect that about a third of all the world's species of birds will be gone. What are they telling us? In North America, just in North America, right now, 74 species of birds will probably be extinct in 10 years. What are they telling us? Now, people often say, well, there's extinction goes on all the time. And that's absolutely right. There is what's called a background extinction rate. And that's about 1 in 5 of all species, birds, animals, everything. About 1 in 5 species go extinct, every year. That's normal. Right now, it's 1,000 a year. 1,000 a year. And that's a conservative estimate. Some people put it up at 1,500. I'm just being very conservative here. 1,000 per year. That's a lot of species going extinct, right? And not just birds, everything. One of those species that's facing extinction in the next 10 years is that meadowlark I told you about. The beautiful meadowlark. Its populations have declined by 80% in the last 20 years. Beautiful bird. I will be very sad if we lose this bird. Gorgeous bird, beautiful song, and yet we're losing it. We're losing the bobwhite. Now, the bobwhite is a game bird. You know what that means? That means it's hunted. People hunt bobwhites. So hunters, really disturbed that we were losing this bird, they've been reintroducing populations of bobwhites into prairies around Texas to try to build up the population. It's working a little bit, but the problem is that bobwhites are ground nesters. They nest on the ground, you know. And what's happening is when they lay their eggs on the ground, in these little ground nests, the eggs are cooking in the shell. Cooking in the shell, in their habitat in South Texas. So the rescue of these birds is really going up in northern parts of Texas and Oklahoma, where right now the ground temperature is it's not so high that it'll cook the shells. What's that telling us? What is that telling us? Their normal habitat is South Texas. The beautiful scissor-tailed flycatcher that migrates up here from Central America. Beautiful little bird, insectivore. If you don't like insects, you'll love this bird because it gobbles up insects. 70% decline in the last 20 years. This bird may be extinct by 2050. The wood thrush. When, you know, I was around when this campus was built. Steve and I will tell you, I remember when this campus was built. I walked the grounds of the woods where Kingwood College is going to be built. And I did that on a late spring day, and I heard wood thrushes calling everywhere. Now, building the campus had nothing to do with the fact that this bird has declined 80%. It would still be here. There are other things going on that's causing this bird to decline. But they're telling us something, aren't they? I mean, when the canary keels over in the coal mine, maybe we better pay attention. So shouldn't we pay attention to these birds that are dying off? What are they telling us? The golden-cheeked warbler is a hill country bird. It only nests in Texas, nowhere else. It winters in Mexico, it comes up to Texas to breed. Nowhere else will you find this bird breeding except in Texas. But it requires those, what people call cedar trees that are actually juniper ash. They require the bark of those juniper ash trees to build their nests. They don't nest in juniper ash trees, they nest in oak trees, but they have to have the bark. Without the bark, they won't nest. And people in the hill country are chopping down juniper ash all over the place to build suburbs. And this bird's declining. You all know the whooping crane, right? Whooping crane. Everybody knows about the whooping crane. It's lots of publicity and should. There are about 300 of them left in the wild. And all of them come down to the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge in the winter. They breed up in Canada at the Buffalo Wood Hole Refuge in Canada. And then they come down here, all of them, all 300 of them, just about all 300 of them come down to Central Texas for the winter. In the Bay of Aransas. Anything happened to that bay, these birds would be gone. Now, we're on an island, people. It's called Earth. It's a little island in the solar system. It's got a very delicate balance. And right now, we're pumping more CO2, carbon, into the atmosphere than has been in the atmosphere since 57 million years ago. And we've done that in less than a century. Now, carbon does build up. 57 million years ago, it did build up, but not, it took it about 10,000 years to build up after a catastrophe that I don't have time to go into. About 10,000 years for it to build up. We've done this in 100 years, in less than a century. We've got more carbon in our atmosphere. Now, the ocean is a carbon sink, meaning carbon goes down in the ocean absorbs it. However, we put so much carbon in the atmosphere that the oceans are acidifying because carbon is acidic. and it sinks down in the ocean, and it acidifies the ocean and kills the coral reefs, which are the breeding grounds for so many fish. And it kills the food supply for fish. And then fish are over-harvested right now, especially by the Japanese, who use these long-line fishing nets. And long line, I mean miles of a long-line fishing net, and they just swoop up all the fish. So you got over-harvesting, you got fish not reproducing, and the ocean's acidifying. As any ecologist will tell you, our oceans are dying. There are large patches of dead zones in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Now, Charles Darwin, and when he published his book, 1859, he also, in that book, he sort of speculated, what if we had an island somewhere? And what if things changed on that island? Well, as Darwin, being the scientist, naturalist that he was, he said, well, the inhabitants of, the proportional numbers of its inhabitants would obviously immediately undergo a change, watch that word, and some species will become extinct. Boy, how prophetic that line was. We've had a lot of birds that have gone extinct. Passenger pigeon. The last passenger pigeon died in 1913 in the Cincinnati Zoo. Those birds migrated through here in such large numbers in the 1800s that people wrote about them in newspapers, and they talked about them as being clouds, looking like a norther coming through. Clouds on the horizon. There were so many of them that when they landed in oak trees, they'd break the limbs off oak trees. That's how many of these guys are. They're not one is left in the wild. The ivory-billed woodpecker. This bird has gone extinct in my lifetime. And it inhabited this area. It inhabited the whole zone of the San Jacinto River. And this bird is extinct. It's gone. It went extinct in my lifetime. Now, you had my friend Deborah Kramer, who wrote this wonderful book, and you had her here, I believe, last spring, right? This wonderful book called The Narrow Edge. I really encourage you to read that book. It's about this bird called a red knot. The red knot is one of those shorebirds I told you about. And the reason for the narrow edge is it migrates along a very narrow coastal edge from Tierra del Fuego all the way up to the top of the world. And several things are happening. It has to have horseshoe crabs. It has to have abundance insects in order to feed itself. When it gets to breeding grounds, it has to have an abundance of crabs to feed its young. And all those things are disappearing. It has to have coastal zones where it can stop and rest and feed. And those coastal zones are being occupied by land development. This bird is in real trouble. This bird is probably not much longer for this world than maybe 2050 at the current rate of extinction. Read the book. Read the book. The prairie chicken, I will be very surprised if it's still around in 2025, 15 years from now. Really surprised. This is the Atwater's prairie chicken. Again, the numbers were above 20 million. When Stephen F. Austin landed his colony at the mouth of the Brazos River, ask your historians here about that. When he landed his little colony of 100 at the mouth of the Brazos River, these birds were so numerous, they used them for meat. You can just shoot them. I mean, they were all over the place. And they were good eating, according to the early settlers. Now there are fewer than 50 of these birds left. And they're all at one little spot called the Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge. How long can they last? You know, population of 50 is not, you got a lot of inbreeding. When you have inbreeding, then you start diminishing the gene pool. This is a wavy albatross. You've probably heard about albatrosses all your life. Let me tell you about albatrosses. They live on the ocean. They live their entire lives on the ocean except during breeding. They only come to land to breed about once every 2 years. The rest of the time, they're spending their whole lives at sea. And they can travel thousands of miles a day on these beautiful wings. But they gotta have fish. And remember what I told you about fish? Fish, not many fish left. And what's worse, we're pouring so much plastics into the ocean. These birds grab plastics. Now, it doesn't immediately kill the bird when they grab plastics, but when they're feeding their chicks, they tend to take plastics to the nest, and the chicks try to eat the plastic, and they die. These birds are all albatrosses right now are endangered. All of them. And we have the Arctic tern. Kathy and I were in Iceland last year, and Iceland is the major breeding ground for Arctic terns, and I thought it was great. Arctic terns were everywhere. I mean, these birds circumnavigate the globe, by the way, every year. And I just, boy, this is great. All these Arctic terns around. And you talk to locals, and they say, this is nothing. Should have seen it 10 years ago. These birds are declining. I'll tell you why in a minute. Another bird, beautiful bird, isn't that a gorgeous bird? It's called an Atlantic puffin. The largest breeding colony in the world of Atlantic puffins is on an island just off the coast of Iceland. And last year, it's 1.5 million Atlantic puffins that breed on that island. And last year, not one pair raised a chick. Not one. 1.5 million. They're declining very, very rapidly. Now here's why. Both the birds, the Arctic tern and the Atlantic puffin, need small fish, very tiny little fish, called sand eels. Common name is sand eels. And they have those small fish to feed their chicks because their chicks can't swallow larger fish. Sand eels are vanishing because sand eels have to have a certain temperature of ocean water, and the ocean water around Iceland and all the Arctic places, by the way, is heating up, it's warming up, and the fish are dying. And these birds are having a struggle to find the fish to feed their chicks, and they also are declining. Okay, it's sad, but what's got to do with us? Well, I love this quote from Genesis. And now, I'm not making a religious statement here, I just love this quote. For dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. Now, to me, that is a beautiful statement because what it says is that we are earth stuff. We are made of the earth, and eventually we're going to return to the earth. We can't get out of that. This is our home. This is where we come from, and this is where we will die. Now, there's talk about building a spaceship and finding this exoplanet in some other solar system where we can occupy and we'll just get on, just everything be fine. Oh, I could go on and on about what's wrong with that problem. Number one, we're part of the Earth. This is our ecosystem. We can't easily transfer it to another ecosystem. It's just not going to be possible. To find a duplicate of the Earth in some other solar system, I mean, the odds of that are astronomical. Not likely. We're part of the earth. We better figure out how to stay on the earth because our destiny on this earth is the same destiny this little piping plover has. That is declining. Huge numbers of this little piping plover used to be along the Texas coast. Now it's kind of hard to find them. And its destiny is our destiny. If we don't save the coast, if we don't save the habitat, if we don't pay attention to the warming of the planet, what's going to happen to this bird? What do you think is going to happen to us? Remember, Canary in the coal mine? We think we're so smart. The beautiful wood thrush, if we no longer hear its song, what's that telling us? Now, there'll still be birds around, believe me. I think house sparrows will still be around. They can adapt to anything. Mockingbirds will still be around. There'll still be birds around. Cardinals will probably still be around. These are very adaptable birds. And pine warblers, which you have all over the place all year round here on this campus, they'll still be around. And I assure you, we will too. I'll still be taking people on bird tours all over the world. This is a photograph of a tour that we led in Brazil. So I'll still be doing that, yeah, but I don't know how many birds we'll be seeing. Probably not as many as we've been seeing. And, I don't know. Birds, telling us a lot. But they ask us, okay, some of us will still be around and some of you will still be around, but what kind of world will you have? What will it look like? Will you have dense forest or will you have little scrawny forests like this? This is the trend. Right now, this is the trend. Not dense forest. Are we still going to have the red-headed woodpecker that, by the way, nests on your campus? Depends on what happens with the warming trend. Are we still going to be able to sit on the coast, look with our binoculars out to sea, and watch the passing of some of these shorebirds like a sanderling going along in its migration path? By the way, this bird breeds all the way up in northern Alaska. It winters between 50 degrees north latitude and 50 degrees south latitude is the broadest wintering ground of any shorebird, and they pass right through here, and many of them winter here. Will they still be there? Will an angler on the dikes around Galveston going out and throwing out his fishing net, as he throws that fishing net out, will he still be able to see this gorgeous bird called an oyster catcher? Oyster catchers are one of the birds that looks like it could be gone in about 20 years. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent. Therefore, never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Thank you. House cats roaming freely are incredible danger to birds. In fact, millions and millions of birds die every year from being caught by cats. The biggest problem, though, is not free-roaming house cats. They're a problem. Not the biggest problem is feral cats. These are cats that are wild cats. They really are wild cats.